When the Interstate Highway System was unveiled in the 1950s, it was hailed as the most ambitious public works project in American history. It promised speed, progress, and national unity, a network of asphalt veins binding the country together. But for many American cities, that promise came with a devastating cost. The new highways didn't just cut through landscapes, they cut through neighborhoods. Entire communities were bulldozed, displaced, and divided. What boosters celebrated as progress often meant the destruction of vibrant Black, immigrant, and working-class districts. And yet, even as bulldozers roared and overpasses rose, there were voices, sometimes faint, sometimes fierce, protesting the sacrifice. This is the story of the highway that split cities in half, and the quiet backlash that tried, and sometimes failed, to stop it.
C, but not B. What are you fellas talking about? Not C. Believe me, not C. You've got to put it on. Gentlemen, gentlemen.
The dream of a superhighway. The idea of a national highway system had roots in the early 20th century, but it was President Dwight D. Eisenhower who turned the dream into reality. After witnessing Germany's autobahns during World War II, Eisenhower envisioned a network of controlled access roads that would make America more mobile, more secure, and more economically powerful. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized 41,000 miles of interstate highways. It was sold to the public as a marvel of engineering and efficiency. Families could travel coast to coast in comfort, goods could move faster, soldiers and tanks could be mobilized if war ever reached American soil. But in city after city, those straight efficient lines on planners' maps collided with messy, lived-in neighborhoods. And when asphalt met community, asphalt almost always won. Highways as urban renewal. By the mid-20th century, many American cities were in transition. Factories were closing, middle-class families were moving to the suburbs, and downtowns were struggling. City leaders saw highways not just as transportation solutions, but as tools of urban renewal. The federal government paid 90% of the construction costs. To mayors and planners, that was irresistible. A highway could clear slums, attract suburban commuters, and signal modernity. But what counted as a slum? Often, it was thriving Black or immigrant neighborhoods whose land was cheaper and whose political power was weaker. These communities were bulldozed in the name of progress, their residents forced into public housing, or scattered across the city. Detroit, Paradise Valley, and Black Bottom. One of the most infamous examples was Detroit's I-375 freeway, which plowed through the heart of the city's Black Bottom and Paradise Valley neighborhoods in the late 1950s. These areas weren't slums. They were cultural powerhouses, filled with jazz clubs, small businesses, and close-knit families. Legends like Duke Ellington and Billie Holiday played here. It was the beating heart of Black Detroit. But to city leaders, it was prime land for a highway. Bulldozers leveled homes and clubs alike, displacing thousands of residents. Today, I-375 is just 3/4 of a mile long, a tiny stretch of asphalt that destroyed one of the most vibrant Black communities in America. New Orleans, Claiborne Avenue. In New Orleans, the Claiborne Expressway, I-10, carved through Tremé, one of the oldest African-American neighborhoods in the nation. Claiborne Avenue had once been a tree-lined boulevard, a center of Mardi Gras parades and community gatherings. In the 1960s, the oaks were cut down, and an elevated highway took their place. The noise of traffic drowned out conversations, businesses shuttered, the neighborhood declined. Residents protested fiercely, but their voices were ignored. To this day, Claiborne's concrete pillars stand as symbols of loss. Grassroots groups now fight to remove the expressway and restore the avenue, a rare example of backlash that has endured across generations. Miami, Overtown. In Miami, the construction of I-95 decimated Overtown, known as the Harlem of the South. Overtown had been a thriving cultural hub, home to theaters, clubs, and hotels where artists like Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong performed. By the mid-1960s, the highway sliced the neighborhood in half. More than 10,000 residents were displaced. Businesses vanished. What was once a cultural jewel was reduced to blight almost overnight. Residents protested, pastors preached against the destruction, and lawsuits were filed. But progress, as defined by planners, rolled on.
Studied, using stereoscopic viewers to observe physical features of the terrain that might prove obstacles or advantages.
Syracuse, the rise and fall of I-81. In Syracuse, New York, Interstate 81 was built directly through the 15th Ward, a historically black neighborhood. The community had schools, churches, and businesses, but it also had low property values, making it an easy target. When the highway opened in 1968, the ward was gone. Thousands were displaced, and Syracuse's black community was scattered. Decades later, the concrete viaduct stands as a scar. But here, the backlash is finally shaping the future. After years of activism, New York has approved plans to tear down the elevated I-81 and replace it with a community grid. Syracuse may become one of the first cities to truly undo the damage of highway construction. The quiet backlash. At the time, opposition to urban highways was often muted. Poor and minority communities had little political clout, and the federal funding machine seemed unstoppable. Yet the backlash did exist. In San Francisco, citizens famously blocked the construction of freeways that would have cut through Golden Gate Park. In Washington, D.C., activists prevented I-95 from slicing through neighborhoods north of downtown. These movements were often interracial, led by homeowners, students, and churches who saw highways as existential threats. In many other cities, however, protests were quieter. Letters to mayors, sermons in churches, community meetings that went unreported. Their resistance rarely stopped the bulldozers, but it planted seeds of skepticism about whether progress was worth the cost.
It's a big, tough job, but it must be done to meet present demands and future.
The long shadow. By the 1980s, the great wave of highway building had slowed, but the scars remained. Across America, you can still trace the lines. Neighborhoods divided by overpasses, business districts gutted, parks lost. Sociologists and historians now agree that the highway system deepened racial segregation and accelerated white flight to the suburbs. Entire generations were cut off from opportunity, while cities inherited crumbling elevated highways that are expensive to maintain. The backlash, once quiet, has grown louder. Today, activists in places like New Orleans, Detroit, and Syracuse are demanding removal or redesign of highways. They argue that repairing the damage is not just about infrastructure, it's about justice. Why it matters. The story of the highway that split cities in half isn't just about asphalt. It's about the choices a nation made, choices that valued speed over community, convenience over culture, efficiency over equity. It's also about resilience. Despite displacement and destruction, many of the affected communities rebuilt their identities elsewhere. Churches, music, and traditions survived even when the neighborhoods did not. And in the 21st century, the conversation has come full circle. Cities are beginning to ask, do highways belong in our downtowns? Or should we tear them down and rebuild the communities we once sacrificed?
And other places indicate that in general, business in an area served by a freeway shows an overall increase.
The interstate highways gave Americans unprecedented freedom. They knit the nation together, made road trips possible, and fueled economic growth. But they also tore through the hearts of cities, leaving scars that remain visible today. The quiet backlash, those letters, marches, and sermons, reminds us that progress is never uncontested. Even in the 1950s and 60s, when highways seemed inevitable, ordinary citizens raised their voices to defend their neighborhoods.